Hello, and welcome to the Women Fantasy Writers YouTube channel. I'm Janet Hanker, and today I'm talking with Krista Wallace. Hi, Krista.
Hello.
I'm glad you could join me today.
Me
I
too.
am about a halfway through the second book in your Gatekeeper series, and you were keeping me up past my bedtime. So I'm really enjoying it. But before we launch into talking about your books, I want to talk about some of your other talents, especially the fact that you're a jazz singer. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was member of the vocal jazz group way back in high school. So that's jazz choir as opposed to the jazz band. And I loved doing that kind of singing. I was always a member of choir and things like that. So having the opportunity to sing in the jazz choir was really, really fun. Graduated from high school, went off and did a whole bunch of other things for a long time. I joined the Vancouver Bach Choir and sang classical music for a number of years. And then a friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm leading a jazz band, a big band, and why don't you come to, we're doing this concert. Would you like to come?" I said, "Sure." So there I was. The jazz band was fantastic. And I said, "You guys don't have a vocalist. What's going on? You should, if you ever want a vocalist, give me a call." And I think it was probably 2 days later that he phoned me and said, "I'm calling your bluff."
That's great.
So,
That's
so
great.
yeah, and that was, oh my gosh, about 25 years ago.
Okay.
And then more recently, I started a jazz duo with a different friend. And so we have our backup group is a computer program called Band in a Box. So my friend plays sax, alto sax, tenor sax, clarinet, and I sing. And we have
Great.
our awesome
I
backup band.
love it. I
Yeah,
love it.
it's really fun.
Singing and writing, and you also are an actor and you have a podcast as well. So I'm not sure how you have time to write, but I'm glad that you do. All right. The series has 3 books, and the reason that I was drawn to Krista's story initially was because it has a really, really strong female protagonist, and I love books with kick-ass female characters. So would you like to tell us a little bit about her and her background, please?
Oh, well, the first thing I have to say is that I'm not a planner. That when we talk about writers who are planners versus writers who are, well, pantsers, right by the seat of your pants, or a spontaneous writer, I'm very much a spontaneous writer.
Oh, okay.
So the story grew from the seeds, if you like, of a fantasy role-playing game that my friends and I used to play for a long, long time. And not that the story is, really lifted from those adventures, but when I thought that I'd like to try writing a story, the ideas I had all came from there. We're creating these really neat stories by playing this game. So, of course, the character of Kier Halladin was my character in the role-playing game.
Great.
And the friends that she meets at the beginning and she winds up traveling with were the characters played by my other friends. Now, that's kind of where it started. So, as you know, at the beginning of the book, she talks about how she walked out of a cornfield at the age of 3.
Yes.
And doesn't know anything about her actual origin. And I didn't know anything about her actual origin either. So the writing of the books was very much my own discovery, getting to know her as I wrote the story. And it's 3 books right now, but I'm working on the next one.
Good. I was going to ask you what's next. Okay, well, I'm happy to hear it.
I shouldn't get ahead of you then, but that's well,
well, we're gonna try to talk further into the story without giving away too many spoilers. Okay.
I don't know how much if I've answered your question about her, but
yes,
about Kier. So she walks out of this cornfield, winds up in this small village, and just happens to meet a sword master and she has a great interest in training with him, which she does. And then at the beginning of the book, she sets out to find out her own origin and find out where she came from, and believes that she has some sort of a purpose. Otherwise, why is she here in this village? And why did she train to be a sword fighter?
The sword master is Brendau.
That's right.
And obviously you explained she comes out and he basically takes her in, and we don't know much other than the fact that she's studying with him. So you're starting to get the sense as the story goes on that there's more, that he knew more when she walked out of the woods, that he knew more about what her background was than maybe even you as a writer knew. So we're discovering what that is as the story goes on, and I like that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really like about the series is your characters and how they interplay with each other, and they have wonderful banter. They're not all friends. Some of them don't like each other. So it's a really interesting, as the story unfolds with them traveling and with all these conflicts going on and people not liking each other, especially we've got, and it's a very mixed group of people. We've got elves and dwarves, halflings, magicians. Okay, so all these interesting characters. One in particular, though, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about is Val Riker. Is that how am I?
Yeah, Val Raker.
Because he is somebody that here meets after she leaves her home, and he picks her up to, he asks her to travel with him because he sees what a great fighter she is.
Mm-hmm.
He is very important to the story. So can you talk a little bit about what is politically going on with him, who he is, and why he's so important to the whole arc of the story?
He's he's a mentor figure. You know, traditional fantasy often has these sort of tropes where there's your mentor character, but he's not the one that has all the answers. So he's Kier's hero. She has learned about him through training with Brendau, and his name is widely known. He is the Duke of the Duchy of Eckert, which is north of where Kier has grown up. But he's exiled because his lands were taken over by the big bad guy, Dragor. And so Valraker's captain, Derry Morant, who is also part of the company, helped him to escape, and he escaped south into the Duchy of Shea. So Valraker is he's a very good sword fighter himself. He's a calming influence in the group. He's one of those people who just has a lot of charisma, so people flock to him and they want to work for him. So this is why he's amassed this group of people with different talents and skills. And so when he asks them to work for him, because here's a problem that he needs to solve that he can't do on his own, they will help him, and they will try to do it for him. But ultimately, his goal is to rid the continent, Rydris, of Dragor and his minions, so that Valraker can take back control of his land. And that's really all he wants.
Because it from the character, it's clear that he's very well known. He's a pretty famous guy, and people respect and like him. And so that's why Kier is so surprised, I think, when he asked her to join him, because it's like, oh my gosh, this person that I've admired from afar wants to join in.
You want me?
Even though she is a spectacular sword person. Oh, and the sword, the tradition that she was trained in is not just the standard sword fighting. There's something bigger than that. Could you tell us a little bit about that tradition?
Right. So lots and lots of people can train to become sword fighters, to wield swords and use them efficiently and expertly, and to be soldiers or just sword fighters like a lot of the other characters are. But Brendau is what we call a Wemniar. So he's a sword master in a particular elite kind of swordplay called the Wepnian. So she has studied with one of the best sword masters there is. And even she doesn't realize his level of importance either. Again, spoilers.
I know. I'm about halfway through book 2, and I just got that. So we won't see any more about that.
Yeah.
The little pieces are coming together. And I had sort of figured that out, that there was bigger underpinnings that they, and I also think that Val also knows more about the backstory than he's letting on to, but I don't know that yet. So I get to discover that as I read on. Okay. So she has a medallion, and there's a part where it comes pretty important in the story. Did she have any idea about the power of the medallion until that particular moment, which I won't go into detail, but there's a particular moment where something pretty big happens. So what did I am assuming she was pretty shocked about what it could do for her.
Absolutely. Well, to call it a trinket is a little bit of an understatement. It's her connection to her past. She knows her adoptive parents, the people who took her in when she came out of the cornfields. They kept it safe for her and then gave it to her when she was a little bit older. And they informed her that she was wearing it when she walked out of the cornfield. So she knows it's somehow her connection to her origin, but it's just a necklace. It's pretty. It has this jewel in it, and some runes on it. But yeah, she doesn't have any idea that it's more than that.
Yeah.
That it might be more than that. It doesn't even cross her mind.
Yeah, I think as I'm reading to the point where I've read to, I get the sense that she came out of the woods. She knows she doesn't know her real family history. She has some link that she's not sure about. And as she moves forward and she trains and she goes out into the world, I got the sense that she knows she's a good swords person. She knows she's a good warrior, but she kind of thinks that's her role, to be the fighter and to go out and save people. I'm not sure at this point in the story where I'm at, she has grasped the vastness of the story that she's actually involved in.
Oh, you're quite right. No,
Yeah.
Like I said, she believes there's some reason why she was left in this cornfield. I mean, why else? There must be something to that. And so she believes there's some sort of purpose. She has some sort of purpose that she has to figure out, but she also wants to find out why she was left there, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And to her, it's just about her and where she came from. There's no concept of any other connection with the world at large.
Right. Well, it's a great story. I'm excited to continue. Let's see, I was going to ask you, you talked a little bit about your singing history. When did you start thinking about writing fantasy seriously, or writing for publication seriously?
I'm not one of these people who always knew I wanted to be a writer. I trained in theater. That's my background. So I was always going to be an actor, which I still am. It was a good friend of mine who was one of the people who played the role-playing game with us. He was actually my husband's best friend for many, many years. He wrote, I guess it's a novella. It was a short novel, and he asked a few of us as friends to read it and critique it for him. And I did that. And I thought, oh, like it's like that was the first time it kind of dawned on me that was something that that other people can do. People who are I like reading, but I didn't know how an author decides to just become a writer. It just never crossed my mind. So when he did that, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Maybe I'd like to give that a try, which is why I then went, okay, well, the stories that we're working on, with the stories we've created in this world, that seems a good place to start. So yeah, I had small children already by the time I decided to give this writing thing a try. And it probably took me a year to write the first draft of Gatekeeper's Key. because I would put the kids to bed at 7:30 and then I would write until 1 o'clock in the morning and then try to stay awake for the rest of the day. And then at the end of that year, I heard of this wonderful conference called the Surrey Writers Conference, which takes place at the end of October. And I decided to attend, and you have an opportunity to pitch your work to agents or editors. And it was at that time, taking workshops and learning, that I realized how much I did not know about writing. So I learned and learned and learned and learned and became a sponge and just drew in more and more information. So that first draft is long since set aside. There are a lot of elements of the book that remain, that first version, but so many improvements to the writing, and so much editing and revising took place after I started actually learning about how to write a novel.
It's incredible. And I did the exact same thing. I wanted to write a book, and I went to a conference, and I realized what I didn't know, and I started training and studying, and it's been years for me. But I mean, it's great because it wasn't just about writing a book for me. It was about learning to be a better writer. So I certainly accomplished that. So that's part of the process too, I think, is learning new things and being better, learning and being interested in new things. I'm older than you are, obviously. And fortunately, I'm retired now, so I have time to write and time to learn. And I continue to go to conferences. And because of COVID, there's been a lot of online things I've been able to attend that I couldn't normally go to, which has been great. I went to one called Women in Publishing last year, which was just incredible for indie authors.
Nice.
And I learned so much and made a connection. And that's where I have a women's fantasy writers group that meets monthly for support. And the group of women came from that. So it's just amazing the resources you can find at conferences. So really good resource for writers. And plus they're a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I've met so many people who have become very close and dear friends, as well as my writing support group. So we read each other's work and critique each other, and just help each other along and give advice wherever necessary. And I think going to conferences is all about being open to recognizing that you have more to learn. You could go and just say, oh, I don't need to learn about that. I don't need to learn about that. And then you're missing out on an opportunity to improve. So conferences, conventions, amazing experiences.
Yeah, I mean, as hard as it can be to take that feedback, you can say critical or constructive feedback, you can't become a better writer if you're not open to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually love the revision process. I really like hearing people's comments on my work. You do hear horror stories, and it is possible for people to be a jerk about it or be unkind in their, for whatever their own little personal motivation is, they will be unkind about the comments they make on your work. But by and large, if I ask someone for feedback on my work, I really like getting those comments, and then I will consider every single comment they make. And even if I make a decision not to agree with it, I will have given it due consideration, and at which point I know why I don't agree with it or why I'm not going to make that change. More often than not, I go, oh, I see your point. And then it gets fun. That's the creative problem solving part that I love, because I need to answer and address this comment that someone has made, but I still need to keep the integrity of the story, which they, as the reader, commenter, critiquer, don't know. I'm the one who knows that. So I have to solve that problem while also keeping the integrity of my story. So I find that really fun.
It is. And sometimes it gives you a different idea of ways to take the story or to expand the character too. So
oh gosh,
I think it's I'm not going to say that I enjoy editing, but there are those moments that you just described that are really fun, because then you get to go back into your creative problem solving. How do you are you like me? Did things start coming to you as you're trying to go to sleep at night, when
Oh
you're in
yeah.
the grocery store? Is your brain constantly?
Yes, I have a little wee notebook that used to live in the hip pocket of my jeans or whatever, or then in an outside pocket of my purse. And if I was on the bus or sitting at waiting for an appointment, or in the grocery store, I'd be able to jot things down. And also just while I'm writing, I'm in the middle of something and go, oh, there's this other thing, and I have to write it down. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The things that trigger some sort of an idea. It's yeah. It's again, it's just being open to these thoughts coming to you.
I think from the universe. Yes,
Yeah.
my brain never shuts up. Like, oh my goodness! But it's such a great journey. I'm so glad I decided to do it.
Yeah.
I read a statistic once that said that of all the people that say, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to do it, and they maybe get partway through, only 3% actually finish a book. And it didn't
Wow.
say publish, but it said to actually finish.
Finish
So
it.
we were in the 3% club, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Go us.
Yeah. Well, actually, my book is not out yet, but hopefully this year I'm doing final edits. So
I hope so.
what a process, man. It's
Yeah.
been, I would like to share your information so people know how to reach you. Let me do a share screen here.
Okay.
And so people, that's great. You've got the book jackets up there for people to see.
Yeah.
There's the medallion.
Yes.
Other interesting. Yeah.
On the cover of Gatekeeper's Key, that's Kier's medallion.
Yes.
And books 2 and 3, you can see, have the same sword and the same, it's a different pendant, and it's a snake biting its own tail. And on one cover that's in the background, and in the other that's more in the foreground. So
now, the Griffin book, is that a new publication, or was that prior to the series?
No, that came out last July. It's
Okay.
a standalone. It's my contemporary humor fantasy romance. I was writing a fantasy novel about music. It's got an electric guitar on the cover there. That was part of, because I'm a rock and jazz singer. I had a rock band for about 12 years, and so a lot in that book was inspired by being a musician. And I was partway through. I was getting close to the end of the story when I realized I'm writing a romance. I realized
surprise, huh?
The romantic storyline was kind of taking higher priority than I expected it to.
Oh.
And so I just, again, about having the integrity of the story, I had to just go with that. And so I let that carry me through to the end of it. But yeah, it's mostly, it's humor. It's I think it's funny.
No, I think that's great. It sounds like something new, another direction. And you also said there may be more. I'm hoping there may be more in Kier's story. You said,
gosh, yeah. I'm working on book 4. It started out, I was going to write a book, but again, never having written anything before, I had no idea that if you have an idea that takes, one sentence to describe, it takes a whole lot more words than that to actually write that story. So the first scene I ever wrote was that opening scene in the bar.
oh, okay.
The second scene I wrote, I realized didn't fit in that book. So it's the scene in book 2 where she meets Kami. I don't know if you're there yet.
Not quite. No.
Okay.
I'm not.
So when you get to the scene where she meets Kami, that was the second scene I wrote. So go figure. So that's why it was a book. I was going to write a book. And then I realized I was writing a trilogy. And then I realized that the story was way, way longer than that. So now it's a trilogy in 4 parts, which may be a trilogy in 5 parts, depending on how much longer it takes me to wind up the story.
Do you plan on continuing to self-publish then at this point?
Yeah. I had an agent for a while, and I did the whole submit to agents, submit to editors, and all of that. And just with the way the traditional publishing industry has changed so much. I kind of got tired of waiting around for somebody else to decide that my book was worth their time. And, I've got a really good story, and it's just kind of hanging out on my computer, not being read. And so I just decided to share it, which is what my podcast is actually.
I wanted to make a comment about, actually about your audiobooks. I was looking at on Goodreads, looking at some comments, and there was a gentleman there that was talking about your audiobooks, and he said, "Oh, whenever an author says they're going to read their own books, I get nervous." He said, "Not with Krista. She has an amazing voice and did a beautiful job on her audiobooks." So I'll have to get one and listen to you narrate. I think that's really great that you're able to also narrate your own books.
Yeah, that something that I had no idea really even existed. It was a friend of mine, Brian Rathbone, who's a fellow fantasy writer. I met him at one of the many conventions I go to, and he heard me reading aloud and said, "You know what? You should try audiobook narration." And so I got into audiobook narration first, and that's why when I decided to start independently publishing my books was right at the beginning of COVID. And I decided to do the podcast because here's something I can do at home.
You're home. Yeah.
So
exactly.
I read each episode of the podcast is one chapter of the book. And then by the time you finish the book, well, then you've got an audiobook. So
yeah.
I had the technology. Most people publish in ebook or print first, and I published in audio first.
Trip. Yeah. Well, when I decided to do this little channel, it was totally an accident. I had a friend that a writer friend. I was helping her with her webpage, and I thought, well, she's so interesting. It would be nice to have an interview with her so that she could promote herself with that, because she's such an interesting person and has such an interesting story. And I had so much fun doing it that I decided I'm going to continue. So thank you for participating today.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
We connected. I'm glad I found books. And before we close, if people go to your website, can they sign up do you do a newsletter?
I do.
Okay, good.
I do. I haven't yet figured out how to do one of those pop-up things where you're just on the page and this thing pops up. So there are a few pages in the website where it says, "Hey, you can sign up for my newsletter here." Good. And there's a little form you can fill out. And yes, I put it out monthly. We'll say monthly, maybe not right on the first, but within, in that first week of the month. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good, because I know if they start reading your book, they're going to want to know about updates. So thank you so much for coming today. It's been wonderful. I cannot tell you what a joy it is to be able to talk with authors whose books I'm reading and loving. So this is it's a win-win for everybody. I appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you and getting to know you a little bit better.
And if you are watching these interviews and like them, please give the channel a follow. I hope to be posting a new interview every couple of weeks. Thanks again for joining us. Goodbye.